Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the deep end, staring at the brackish water that had turned the color of old pennies. Algae bloomed in geometric patterns across the surface, and something, probably a bird's nest from last spring, floated near the shallow end in various states of decomposition. The filter system had given up the ghost sometime in August, and the repair quote had come in at $8,400. His wife, Sarah, had stopped asking him about it weeks ago. "It's a hazard," she'd said last Tuesday morning while Marcus drank his coffee and avoided eye contact. "Emma asked me yesterday why the pool looks dead. I didn't know what to tell her. A dead thing in our backyard that nobody uses." Their daughter was 7. She'd learned to swim in that pool 2 summers ago. Marcus could still see her in his mind's eye, how she'd floated on her back for the first time, laughing hysterically at the sky, convinced she'd finally figured out magic. Now the pool was a monument to neglect, and Marcus was out of options. The HOA fees had increased that spring, and the job at the accounting firm had started cutting hours in June. Sarah had gone back to work as a pediatric nurse, pulling double shifts that left her knees aching and her patients thin. They were managing, not thriving, managing, and the pool had become the physical manifestation of everything they couldn't fix. The quote for draining and removing the in-ground pool structure was $12,000. The quote for filling it in and capping it was $6,500. The quote for repair was $8,400, plus another $120 a month in maintenance costs that would stretch into perpetuity. Marcus had done what he always did when trapped. He made a spreadsheet. Rows of numbers, calculations, scenarios, everything pointing toward the same conclusion. On the morning he decided to do it himself, the sky was the color of limestone. He'd spent the previous evening watching YouTube videos, taking notes on his phone, and having 4 beers in the garage while pretending to be organizing tools. By the time he came to bed at midnight, Sarah was already asleep. He'd kissed her temple and made a decision she didn't know about. The permit application sat on the kitchen counter, filled out but unsigned. The HOA's website had a section for modifications to residential landscapes, and it was very clear. All modifications to exterior structures must be submitted for review and approval at least 30 days in advance. The Hillcrest Heights Homeowners Association reserves the right to determine whether modifications maintain community aesthetic standards and preserve property values. Marcus had read it 3 times. He was trying to decide if draining a dead pool counted as a modification or a restoration. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother, who lived in Sacramento and had taken to checking in every other day like he was a teenager again. "Mom, how's Sarah? Is she still working those crazy hours? You should make her rest." "Marcus, she's good. Busy season at the hospital." It wasn't a lie exactly. It was an incomplete truth, which was different. Marcus had become fluent in incomplete truths. He set the phone down and walked out to the backyard at 6:47 a.m. before the neighborhood woke up, before Sarah emerged for her shift, before he could talk himself out of it. The morning was cool and damp. A few birds were beginning their territory disputes in the trees that bordered their property. He'd bought a pump from Home Depot the day before, a 1-horsepower submersible pump, heavy as a kettlebell with instructions printed in 6 languages. He'd bought a discharge hose, a filter sock, and a dechlorination tablet. He'd watched a 43-minute video titled "Draining Your Pool, a Beginner's Guide," which had been made by a retired pool technician from Texas who kept calling everyone buddy and saying "not rocket science, folks" every few minutes. It wasn't rocket science. It was just a series of small decisions that added up to something neither small nor simple. Marcus had always been afraid of decisions like this. Sarah was the one who made big moves. She'd quit a job she loved to be with Emma when she was born. She'd gone back to work against her parents' wishes. She'd pushed for them to buy this house even though Marcus had wanted to rent for another 5 years. "We build equity," she'd said, and she'd been right, the way she usually was. But this was his decision, his responsibility, his risk. He assembled the pump at the pool's edge, moving with the careful deliberation of a man performing surgery. The water was cold when he waded in, up to his shins, his shorts soaking immediately. His feet sank into the silt at the bottom, which released more of the dead water smell, like a basement that had been sealed for 20 years. The discharge hose ran across the backyard and out through the gate toward the storm drain in the street. This part he'd actually researched: drainage laws, chlorine requirements, environmental codes. The dechlorination tablet would neutralize the water before it entered the public system. He was doing it right. Mostly right, the permit part was questionable. He switched on the pump at 7:15 a.m. exactly as the neighborhood was beginning to wake. The machinery hummed to life and water began flowing out of the pool in a steady, determined stream. It was happening. This was really happening. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus jumped. Sarah stood at the sliding glass door, still in her work clothes from the previous evening, navy scrubs with cartoon animals on them, her dark hair twisted up in a chaotic bun. Her face had that particular expression of exhaustion and disbelief that had become increasingly common over the past few months. "It's been 3 months," Marcus said. He didn't turn off the pump. "The water's ruined. I did research. This is the cheapest option." "Without telling me, without asking." "I'm asking now." Sarah stared at him. The pump continued its work, a steady technological pulse between them. She looked at the water leaving their pool, leaving their property, leaving his ability to pretend things could stay as they were. "Did you call the HOA?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked at the water level, already visibly lower. The pump was efficient. Everything was working exactly as designed. "Marcus." "No. You need a permit." "I know. You need to get approval." "I'm handling it." Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she looked older, not just tired, older, like she'd aged 6 months in the last 6 minutes. "We cannot have a problem with the HOA," she said. "We cannot. Marcus, do you understand? My mother called yesterday to ask if we were okay financially. Apparently, she'd heard from Carol Hutchins's sister that there were rumors about people in the neighborhood struggling. I had to lie to my own mother because I don't want that news traveling back to her church friends like we're some kind of charity case. We're fine. We're doing what we can, which is not fine. It's not. And if you give the HOA ammunition to start complicating things, liens, fines, legal fees, we're not fine anymore. We're in crisis." She said it like she'd been thinking about it, like she'd already calculated the scenarios. Marcus reached over and turned off the pump. It wound down with a defeated whine. The water in the pool, which had been draining so purposefully, went still again. The neighborhood birds kept singing. The sun continued climbing. Everything went back to waiting. "I'll call them," Marcus said. "I'll submit the thing, I'll get the approval, no problem." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head, not in agreement but in recognition of a loss. She turned and walked back inside. Marcus stood alone in the backyard, the pump at his feet, the half-drained pool a metaphor he wasn't sophisticated enough to unpack. He would call the HOA, he would follow the rules. He would do everything correctly and still end up with a problem, because that's what this all was now. A problem that needed solving. The Hillcrest Heights HOA was managed by a company called Westbrook Property Management, which operated from a low-slung building 3 miles away that looked like it had been designed specifically to be forgettable. Marcus had driven past it 100 times without ever noticing it. The application form was online, 8 pages. He filled it out on Thursday night while Sarah was at the hospital and Emma was in bed, clicking through drop-down menus and uploading photos of the dead pool from multiple angles. Project description: removal and capping of in-ground swimming pool structure. Reason for modification: pool filtration system failure. Estimated repair cost exceeds replacement value. Modification maintains structural safety and property value. Expected timeline: 2-3 weeks. Contractor information: self-performed with hired labor for structure removal. He hit submit at 11:47 p.m. The confirmation email arrived the next morning. Application 47,832 received. Review period: 30 days. Please allow processing time. The Architectural Review Committee will contact you if additional information is needed. Marcus felt the slight loosening in his chest that comes from following procedure, from being on the right side of bureaucracy. He'd done it correctly. He'd waited. He'd asked permission. He deleted the YouTube videos from his browser history and tried not to think about the application at all. The HOA president was Karen Hoffman, which Marcus learned when she showed up at his door on Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m., which was unusual because Tuesday mornings were when Marcus usually was at work. except the firm had moved him to part-time hours to optimize staffing allocation, which was corporate speak for, "We don't have enough work to justify your full salary." She was precisely what he'd expected a woman named Karen, who was also an HOA president, to look like. Highlights that cost more than his car payment, a visor that served no functional purpose, athletic wear that had never seen actual athletic activity. She was maybe 55, maybe 60, with the kind of tan that suggested either Hawaii or a skin cancer dermatologist she was visiting regularly. "Marcus Chen," she didn't phrase it as a question, though it was one. "Yes. I'm Karen Hoffman, president of the Architectural Review Committee. I received your application about the pool removal, and I want to talk to you about some concerns." His first instinct was relief that she was being cordial. His second instinct was the growing sense that cordiality was a performance that hadn't yet revealed its true nature. "Sure, come in." He didn't call Sarah, he should have, but he didn't. He'd handle this. Karen stepped into their kitchen with the confident gait of someone used to being welcomed everywhere. She didn't sit when he gestured to a chair. She remained standing, maintaining the physical advantage, and Marcus recognized this as a negotiating tactic he'd learned about somewhere along the way. "How long have you lived at Hillcrest Heights?" she asked. 7 years. "And you've been a member in good standing of the HOA that entire time?" Yes, this was technically true. They paid their fees. They didn't have complaints filed against them. "Then you understand the importance of maintaining community standards. What we've built here, it's special. It's not just a neighborhood, it's an investment. When families move into Hillcrest Heights, they're not just buying a house. They're buying into a lifestyle, a status, a commitment to excellence." Marcus nodded because stopping her seemed rude. "This pool," Karen continued, and now she was gesturing at the backyard, which she'd somehow navigated to see without being invited. "When was it built?" "I don't actually know. We bought the house with it already installed." 1987, Karen said. She pulled out her phone and scrolled. The original owner, Richard Portman, had it built in 1987. He was a surgeon, very prominent man, very prominent family in this community. That pool was featured in a Sunset magazine article about architectural innovations in residential properties. 1989. Do you know how many neighborhoods can say that? Do you know how rare that is? Marcus didn't know. Marcus didn't care. Marcus wanted this conversation to end. "The pool represents a legacy," Karen continued, and her voice had taken on the cadence of someone giving a prepared speech. "It represents the vision and commitment of the families who built Hillcrest Heights into what it is. When we tear down structures like that, we're not just removing a pool. We're erasing history. We're saying that nothing that came before us matters. We're saying we're willing to destroy the past for convenience." "The pool is broken," Marcus said quietly. "The filter is damaged. It's a safety hazard. It's cost." "Nothing is broken that can't be fixed, Mr. Chen. That's my philosophy. That's what separates the people who maintain community integrity from the people who give up." She looked at him directly then, and Marcus understood that this wasn't about a pool. This was about him, about his willingness to sacrifice something in service of his own convenience, about whether he was the kind of person who understood what he owed to the people around him, to the history he'd inherited by choosing to live here. "I'm going to recommend to the board that we deny your application," Karen said. "We should investigate restoring the structure, not destroying it. That's what stewardship looks like." She turned to leave, then paused at the kitchen threshold. "You have 30 days to respond to the decision. After that, if you proceed with removal, you'll be in violation of architectural review standards. That violation comes with a $500 monthly fine until the structure is restored or the violation is remedied. We take these things very seriously, Mr. Chen. We have to. Otherwise, this neighborhood falls apart." Then she was gone, and Marcus stood alone in his kitchen, processing the fact that he'd been thoroughly outmaneuvered by a woman who'd spent the entire conversation talking about everything except actual, factual reality. He called Sarah while she was on a hospital break. Her voice was different on the phone when she was at work, more professional, more distant, like she'd left some essential part of herself at home. "What did she want?" Sarah asked. "To say no, to deny the application." "On what grounds?" "The pool is historic. Apparently it was in Sunset magazine. The neighborhood founder or something had it built. Removing it is erasing history." Sarah made a sound that was almost a laugh. It's a pool, Marcus, not the pyramids. I know. Did she give you options? To fix it, to spend $8,400 on repairs that might not even work, and then maintain it forever. Sarah was quiet for a moment. In the background, Marcus could hear hospital sounds, beeping monitors, distant announcements, the organized chaos of people trying to save lives. You need to appeal, Sarah said finally. You need to follow the process. Get the denial in writing, submit an appeal with documentation of the repair costs, make the case that it's not economically feasible. Make it about facts instead of history. That will take time. We have time. But they didn't really. Or at least, they didn't have the kind of time that felt comfortable spending. Every month of delay was another month of the pool sitting there, a physical reminder of their inability to fix things. I'll handle it, Marcus said. We'll handle it, Sarah corrected. Together, okay. But even as she said it, Marcus could hear the exhaustion in her voice. She was handling enough. The pool wasn't her problem to solve. The denial letter arrived certified mail on Friday. It was printed on official Hillcrest Heights Architectural Review Committee letterhead, signed by Karen Hoffman, and included language about preservation of historical community assets and responsible stewardship of neighborhood aesthetic standards. Marcus read it 3 times, looking for anything he could use. Everything in the letter was opinion dressed up as policy. There was no actual rule that said he couldn't remove the pool. The standards were subjective. The commitment to excellence was marketing language. But underneath it was a threat that was very clear. Defy us, and we'll make it expensive. He called a lawyer on Monday morning, a local guy named Robert Silverstein who handled HOA disputes. The consultation cost $250, and Robert's assessment was delivered in the calm voice of someone who'd seen this all before. You can fight it, Robert said, and you'll probably win. HOA boards can't prohibit modification based on aesthetic preference alone. You have economic hardship, safety concerns, and a legitimate modification request. The case law supports you. But they can drag it out. They can file countersuits. They can claim that your removal of the pool violates other covenants. It'll cost you more in legal fees than it will in pool removal. Most people don't want to fight an HOA because it's exhausting, it's protracted, and even if you win, you still have to live next to these people. So what do I do? Pay for the repair, get it fixed, keep your head down, or sell and move. Those are your real options. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He was doing the math in his head. $8,400 for repair, plus ongoing maintenance, plus the knowledge that he was doing something he didn't believe in because an HOA president had decided that history mattered more than money, more than sense, more than his own family's well-being. There's not a third option? Marcus asked. Robert was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. There's always a third option, Robert said. But the third option usually involves accepting that the system isn't fair and deciding to live with the consequences. I can't advise you on that one. That's between you and your conscience. September came and nothing was solved. The pool remained empty, a crater of cracked concrete and dead dreams in their backyard. Marcus had gotten the denial letter, and he'd filed an appeal, and the appeal had been received, and they were waiting for the next review period in the next month. Sarah's hospital had gone into crisis mode. A respiratory virus moving through the pediatric ward, beds at capacity, nurses pulling mandatory overtime. She was working 60-hour weeks, coming home with dark circles under her eyes and a quality of exhaustion that bordered on the existential. Emma had started 2nd grade. She'd made a friend named Lily, and Lily had asked why Emma's pool was gone but her backyard had water. Emma didn't know how to explain that they'd drained it on purpose, that sometimes things had to die to save money. Is it dead? Emma had asked Marcus one afternoon, standing at the sliding glass door. The pool? Yes. Marcus didn't know how to answer that. It wasn't alive, so it couldn't die. But it had been something once, and now it was nothing. Yes, he said finally, I think maybe it is. Emma had nodded like that made sense, and had gone back to her homework. Marcus was sitting in the home office, which was really just a corner of the bedroom with a desk, when the email arrived from Westbrook Property Management. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Chen and had the subject line urgent, notice of architectural violations. His heart did something complicated when he read it. The notice listed 2 violations. 1, removal of architectural structure without approval of ARC, and 2, maintenance of property in a condition that fails to meet community standards. The fine was $500 per month, effective immediately, with accumulated fees due within 30 days. There was an appeal process. There was also a deadline, 30 days to respond, or the matter would be escalated to the board and potentially referred to legal action. Marcus printed the letter. He read it 6 times. He did the math. $500 a month meant the fine would exceed the cost of pool repair in less than 17 months. It meant that his defiance, if he'd actually defied them, which he hadn't, would cost him more than compliance. But he hadn't actually removed the pool yet. He'd drained it. That was it. He was sitting in legal limbo, having done something that wasn't quite a violation but was being treated like one. Sarah came home from the hospital at 11 p.m. She saw the printed letter on the kitchen counter and read it standing up, still in her work clothes, still carrying her hospital bag. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, anger, something that looked like despair. "They can't do this," she said. "They're doing it. The pool is still intact. You didn't remove it. How can they fine you for a violation you haven't committed?" "Because I'm planning to, apparently. The application shows intent. They're preemptively punishing intent." Sarah sat down at the kitchen table. She looked so small in that moment, like the chair was swallowing her. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes. We need to fight this. We need to lawyer up and fight them." Marcus sat across from her. The kitchen light was very bright, making everything stark and real. "The lawyer said fighting costs more than just fixing the pool," Marcus said quietly. "And even if we win, it doesn't get cheaper. It gets more complicated. So what, we just pay them? Or we repair the pool, or we move." The words hung in the air between them like poison gas. They'd built equity in this house. They'd planted roots. Emma had friends. Sarah's hospital commute was exactly 23 minutes. "We're not moving," Sarah said finally. "We're not moving because an HOA president with too much time on her hands thinks a broken pool is a historical monument. So we fight. Yes, we fight." Marcus called Robert Silverstein the next morning. He paid the $500 retainer. Robert filed an appeal and drafted a response letter pointing out that no actual violation had occurred, that the fine was being applied preemptively, and that Westbrook Property Management was operating beyond its legal authority. And then they waited. The waiting was the worst part. The waiting meant checking email obsessively. The waiting meant Sarah stopped sleeping well, would wake at 3 a.m. and go downstairs and drink water and stand in the dark of the living room. The waiting meant Emma asked more than once if they were moving. Where would they go? Would Lily be able to come with them? The waiting meant Marcus fell into a kind of fugue state where he wasn't quite present. He'd go to work and move numbers on spreadsheets and attend meetings about nothing. He'd come home and open the fridge and forget what he was looking for. He'd lie in bed next to his wife and feel the shape of their lives being slowly reshaped by forces entirely outside their control. 3 weeks into the waiting, Marcus found himself standing at the edge of the pool at midnight on a Saturday. Sarah was asleep. Emma was asleep. The whole neighborhood was asleep, and he was alone with the dead pool and the knowledge that every day he didn't fill it in, every day he let it sit there empty, was a day of violation. He could finish the removal. He could drain the water completely, though it was mostly drained, and could cover the structure and fill it in. He could do it in a weekend if he worked fast enough. By the time the HOA reacted, the work would be done. They could fine him all they wanted, but they couldn't unfill a pool. He went to the garage and looked at the equipment he'd assembled. The pump was there, coiled on a shelf like a sleeping snake. The filling materials were stacked in boxes. He had everything he needed. He stood there for a long time, hands shaking for reasons he couldn't quite name. Then he went back to the house and got into bed next to his wife, and he didn't get out of it. The appeal decision came on a Tuesday. Robert Silverstein called Marcus at work. "They denied it," Robert said without preamble. "And they're escalating to the board. Looks like they're planning to file a formal lien against your property if the violation isn't remedied within 60 days. A lien? The word landed in Marcus's stomach like a stone. "They can do that?" Marcus asked. "Technically, yes, if the CC and RS, the covenant, conditions, and restrictions, give them that authority. Most do. A lien basically means they've attached a claim to your property. It doesn't get lifted until you either fix the violation or settle with them. And if you don't, it stays on your title indefinitely. You can't refinance the house. You can't sell it without clearing the lien. It becomes a permanent legal problem. Marcus was very quiet. He could hear the office sounds around him, keyboards, phones, the ambient noise of capitalist machinery continuing indifferently. "I need to think," Marcus said. "You don't have time to think," Robert replied. "You have 59 days until the lien filing, and you need to decide whether you're going to fix the pool, challenge them in court, or accept the lien and deal with the consequences. Those are your only real options." After Marcus hung up, he didn't move for a long time. He sat at his desk with his hands in his lap, and he tried to calculate the cost of each scenario. Option 1, fix the pool. $8,400, plus $120 monthly maintenance, plus the knowledge that he'd surrendered to extortion dressed up as community standards. Option 2, challenge them in court. $5,000, $15,000 in legal fees, maybe longer, stress, disruption. And even if he won, the victory would taste like vinegar. Option 3, accept the lien, keep his money, keep his defiance, lose his ability to refinance or move, explain to Sarah that they were essentially trapped. He called Sarah during her lunch break. She was at the hospital, eating something that sounded crunchy. "A lien," she repeated, her voice reaching a pitch he rarely heard. "They can put a lien on our house. If we don't comply in 60 days, yes. Marcus, that's our net worth. That's everything." "I know. We need to get the pool fixed. That's $8,400 we don't have. Then we get a line of credit. We get a personal loan. We refinance. We do whatever we have to do because we cannot have a lien on this house." He could hear the panic in her voice, the way it had climbed into something close to hysteria. "Sarah." No, I'm handling this. I'm calling the bank today. We can probably get a $10,000 loan. We'll repair the pool and we'll move on and we'll never speak of this again." She hung up before he could respond. That evening, Sarah did call the bank. The loan was approved by Thursday, $10,000 at a 7.2% interest rate, financed over 3 years, which would mean their payments would be roughly $300 a month for 36 months. $300 a month plus the $120 for pool maintenance. $420 a month for a pool they didn't use and didn't want, a pool that had stopped being a luxury and had become a financial anchor. Marcus called a pool repair company Saturday morning. They could send someone out Monday to assess the damage and provide a detailed quote. The technician's name was Derek, and he had the weathered look of a man who spent too much time in the sun. He spent 30 minutes inspecting the pool with a flashlight and a clipboard, then gave Marcus the verdict. "Pumps shot, filters compromised. The calcium buildup is significant. Might be able to replace the pump and rebuild the filter, but honestly, you're probably looking at $7,000 to $8,000 in labor, plus another $2,000 in parts. And that's assuming there's no structural damage, which there might be, given how long it's been sitting untended." Marcus didn't say anything. He was doing the math he'd already done 100 times. "The water damage alone," Derek continued. "From evaporation and settling, that's going to cost probably $500 to rebalance. You're really looking at 10 grand minimum, maybe more. For a pool this old, you might want to consider just filling it in. Cost less, and you're not pouring money into infrastructure that's already showing its age." "My HOA says I have to repair it," Marcus said. "It's apparently historically significant." Derek laughed, actually laughed. "A pool from the 80s is historically significant. What is it, made of dinosaur bones?" "Apparently it was in a magazine once." "Man, people are crazy." Derek extended an invoice for the assessment. $100. If you want to move forward with repairs, I can schedule someone out for next week." Marcus told him he'd call him back. That night, Marcus sat in the garage and made a list. On one side, he wrote repair pool. On the other side, he wrote fill pool. Under each heading, he documented all the costs, all the consequences, all the futures. The math didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about money. This was about Sarah's panic, about Emma's confusion, about the way Karen Hoffman's decision had metastasized into every corner of his life. This was about the fact that he'd played by the rules and had been punished for doing so, and the only way to stop the punishment was to surrender. He called Derek Monday morning and said to move forward with the repairs. The pool repair began on a Wednesday in early October, and it went wrong on day 3. Derek's team had drained the remaining water and discovered that the pool structure had cracked during the years of neglect. The ground beneath had shifted. The calcium buildup Derek had mentioned wasn't buildup. It was mineral deposits from repeated freeze-thaw cycles that had created fissures in the concrete. The repair, Derek said, wasn't possible. The structure was too compromised. "You'd be better off filling it in," Derek said over the phone. "I can do that for $6,500. It'll take a weekend, and then you don't have this problem anymore." Marcus was at work. He was staring at a spreadsheet that no longer made sense. His hands were shaking. "But the HOA." "Screw the HOA. They want a pool, let them fix it. You're looking at a failing structure. I'm not going to charge you $8,000 to band-aid a problem. That's not professional." Marcus called Sarah. Sarah called Robert. Robert said that if the structure was genuinely compromised, Marcus had grounds to argue that repair was not feasible, and therefore removal was the only option. "This actually might be your out," Robert said. "A structural engineer's report showing the pool is beyond repair. That's documentation you can take to the HOA. You've done everything they've asked. You tried to repair. The repair isn't possible. Therefore, removal is the only responsible option." "They'll still fine me." "Maybe, but they'll have to explain why they forced you to attempt an impossible repair before allowing you to do the reasonable thing." Marcus felt something shift inside him. This wasn't surrender anymore. This wasn't them winning. This was just reality finally admitting what he'd known all along. He told Derek to go ahead with the filling. The work began the following Saturday. Derek brought a crew of 3 and they showed up at 7 a.m. with a dump truck and an excavator. They were loud. They were efficient. They were filling his dead pool with clean earth and the future. Sarah was at the hospital. Emma was at a birthday party 3 neighborhoods away. Marcus stood in the backyard and watched strangers dismantle everything Karen Hoffman had been so desperate to preserve. The satisfaction should have been complete. Instead, it felt hollow. By noon, the pool was half full. The deep end was now a gentle slope of dirt and rock. The shallow end was going next. By evening, it would be level ground. By next week, they could seed it with grass. By next month, there would be no evidence that a pool had ever existed here at all. Marcus's phone rang at 1:30 p.m. It was Karen Hoffman. "I understand you're having the pool filled in," she said without preamble. "The structure is compromised. It can't be repaired. I have an engineer's report." "You didn't get approval for removal." "I have documentation that repair isn't feasible. Removal is the only logical option." "Logical according to whom?" Marcus turned away from the excavator so he could hear her better. "According to reality," he said quietly. Karen's voice, when she spoke, had lost its cordial edge. What remained was something colder. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Chen. You're violating your covenants and you're going to regret it." "I already regret everything about this situation," Marcus said. "But I'm not going to let you hold my family hostage for the sake of architectural sentimentality. That pool represents—" "I don't care what it represents. Not anymore. I tried to do this your way. I applied. I appealed. I even tried to repair it. The structure is broken, Karen, just like you're broken. Just like this entire system is broken. And I'm not going to pour money into fixing something that doesn't work because you've decided it's important." He hung up before she could respond. The excavator continued its work. The earth continued its transformation. Sarah came home from the hospital at 11 p.m. to find the pool gone and the backyard transformed into a construction zone. She stood at the sliding glass door looking at it, and Marcus couldn't read her expression. "It's done," he said. "They're going to fine us." "I know. We're going to have to fight." "I know." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she did something Marcus hadn't seen her do in months. She smiled. Not a happy smile, something more complicated. "Good," she said. "I'm tired of being afraid of them." The citation arrived on Monday morning. hand-delivered by someone from Westbrook Property Management. The envelope was official, thick with the weight of legal language, and inside was a notice that the architectural violation had reached critical status and that the property was now subject to a lien filing. The amount, $500 per month for the months that the violation had existed, plus penalties, plus legal fees. Total, $3,847. And that was just the beginning. Karen Hoffman filed her formal complaint with the board on Wednesday. She requested an emergency session. She wanted Marcus held liable for damages to the community property value. She wanted the lien enforced immediately. Robert Silverstein received a copy of the complaint Friday morning and called Marcus that afternoon. "It's aggressive," Robert said, "but it's also desperate. She's lost the appeal on the merits, so now she's trying to escalate emotionally. She's citing community surveys, property value analysis, something about the neighborhood brand being damaged. It's all theater." "Is it working?" "I don't know yet. We're going to the emergency session Monday night. I'll be there. You and Sarah should be there too. We need to show that you're serious, you've documented everything, and you've acted responsibly within the confines of what was actually possible." The emergency board meeting was held in the Hillcrest Heights Community Center, which was a building Marcus had passed 100 times without ever going inside. It was beige, efficient, and depressing. Fluorescent lights, brown carpeting, the particular smell of institutional coffee and broken dreams. There were about 30 people in the room, spread across folding chairs arranged in rows. Karen sat in the front, next to another woman Marcus didn't recognize. Behind them were what he assumed were other board members, and in the back, looking uncomfortable, were Marcus and Sarah. The meeting was called to order by a man named Douglas Chen, no relation. He'd mentioned at their first HOA meeting, who was the board secretary. Douglas had the exhausted affect of someone who'd been trapped in HOA governance long enough to regret most of his life choices. Karen was first to speak. She presented her case with the polish of someone who'd rehearsed extensively. She showed photos of the pool before and after, specifically using a photo of the pool when it had been beautiful and functional. She displayed a property value analysis that claimed removing pools reduced property values by up to 8%. She referenced the Sunset magazine article, actually producing a printout of the original piece from 1989, dated and laminated. "This isn't about money," Karen said, and here her voice took on the tone of someone about to explain why it was actually entirely about money. "This is about the integrity of what we've built here. Hillcrest Heights is distinguished by its commitment to quality. That pool was a symbol of that commitment. When we allow it to be destroyed without consequence, we're saying that individual convenience matters more than collective identity. We're saying that our values are negotiable." She sat down, the room was quiet. Then Marcus stood up. He wasn't planning to, he had notes. Robert had prepared him, but standing up felt right, felt necessary, and the words came before he could stop them. "I'm Marcus Chen," he said, and his voice surprised him by being steady. "I bought my house in this community 7 years ago because I believed in what it represented. I thought I was investing in something stable and good." He looked at Karen, then at the board members. "I have one question for this board," he said. "Which of you actually uses the pool?" Silence. "None of you, because most of us don't. Most of us bought houses that came with pools because that's what was available, and we were grateful for the discount. We were thankful that a previous owner had installed something beautiful that we might use, but never would." He held up the structural engineer's report. "This pool is broken. It's been broken for months. It became broken because of age and weather and the simple entropy of physical structures. The board demanded I repair it. I attempted to repair it. A licensed structural engineer, who had no stake in this, no opinion, no agenda, examined it and determined that repair is not financially or practically feasible." He paused. "So I had 3 choices. 1, destroy my family's financial security by spending $8,000 on repairs that won't actually work. 2, maintain a broken structure indefinitely, paying $120 a month in maintenance costs for something that cannot be repaired. Or 3, do the responsible thing and fill it in." He turned to address the full room. "Karen Hoffman has treated this pool like it's a historic monument. But it's not a monument. It's a hole in the ground that we've been throwing money into for decades. It's not a legacy. It's a liability, and I'm done pretending otherwise." Sarah stood up then, and her voice when she spoke was different from his, quieter but somehow more powerful. "My family's well-being matters more than architectural sentiment," she said simply. "I don't know how to make that clearer." They sat down. The room was absolutely silent. Douglas called for discussion. No one spoke. He called for a vote on whether to enforce the lien filing. The vote was 5-2 in favor of enforcement, with Karen and one other board member voting yes. But Robert caught Marcus on the way out. "Look at the minutes," he said quietly. "2 dissenting votes, that's your opening. We file in court, and we cite those dissenting votes as evidence that the board is divided on the authority to enforce. We argue that a split decision on enforcement suggests the violation is debatable. We ask for a temporary stay on lien filing pending legal review." "And then what?" Marcus asked. "And then we drag it out long enough that the HOA gets tired of fighting. Months go by. Legal bills accumulate on their side. Eventually, they decide it's cheaper to settle than to pursue. We negotiate a removal of the lien in exchange for a fine you can actually pay." It was a strategy built on exhaustion, which seemed about right for this entire situation. But Marcus was done being exhausted. He was done playing defense. "I'm filing a countersuit," Marcus said, "for harassment, for abuse of process, for operating outside the board's legal authority." Robert looked at him like he'd announced plans to commit felony. "That's not a good idea," Robert said carefully. "Why not?" "Because you'll still be living next to these people. Because you're still in this community. Because turning it into scorched earth means you can't come back from it." "I don't want to come back from it," Marcus said. "I want them to understand that what they did was wrong." "They won't. People don't change because they're sued. They just become angrier." Marcus didn't respond. He was looking at Karen, who was talking to Douglas by the door, pointing back at him, her face flushed with vindication. She'd won or thought she had. The lien was filed. His property was encumbered. His family's future was complicated. But he had something she didn't have. He had clarity. He understood now what this was really about. It wasn't about a pool or history or community standards. It was about power. It was about people who'd been given a small amount of institutional authority and had become addicted to the sensation of wielding it. In that time, Marcus and Sarah refinanced their house to pay for legal costs, then refinanced again when they discovered the lien had technically prevented them from getting the best rates. Emma was taken into the home of a school counselor to talk about family stress, which cost them another $1,200 out of pocket because their insurance didn't cover it. Sarah stopped working the double shifts and went back to regular hours, which meant their income decreased at the exact moment their expenses increased. Marcus found out during month 7 that Karen Hoffman had sent an email to other board members titled, "Protecting Our Community from Residents Like the Chens," which had been forwarded to the neighborhood listserv by someone who didn't like Karen and wanted to embarrass her. The email contained lies about Marcus, claims that he'd threatened her, claims that he'd trespassed on her property, claims that he'd harassed her family. None of it was true. All of it was documented as false by Marcus's possession of Ring camera footage and digital records. Robert used it in the settlement negotiations. In month 11, Karen's lawyer requested a meeting. The board had decided, they said, that the lien should be removed in exchange for Marcus paying a $1,500 compromise fine for the violation. Marcus told Robert to counter with $500. The compromise was $750, paid in January, which meant the lien was lifted in February. Karen was voted off the board at the next election, though not because of Marcus's lawsuit. She was voted off because a group of other residents, the ones who'd also been tired of her governance, had organized an opposition slate. Turns out that Marcus wasn't the only person she'd been creative with rules for. The pool was filled in, grassed over, and by the following summer it was completely unnoticeable except for the fact that one section of grass was greener than the rest.